Welcome to DIY is my happy place. I'm Amy, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite DIY project I have ever done. It is painting my kitchen countertops. When I first saw the countertops in this home and saw that they were brown Formica, I knew there had to be something changed about them. So I decided I was going to do paint and epoxy. I've done epoxy in the past. In fact, I epoxied a tabletop, and to this day it is still my #1 viewed video on YouTube. And I love my table. But I learned a lot of things from doing my table, one of which is the best type of epoxy to use. And I came across a brand called Stone Coat Countertops. You order it online, and it is my favorite epoxy to date. So, watch my video. I'll give you all the tips and tricks that I came up with, and share this out where you can. Like and please subscribe to my channel. Painting my countertops was a huge endeavor, but so worth it. The amount of money that it cost to completely renovate my kitchen was 1/10 of what it would have cost if I would have tried to even just have new Formica put in, much less to have it look like marble. I got a countertop that someone was discarding and decided this would be my trial run. And I actually glued pieces together so that it would fit in the space that I wanted it to go in, and did my marbling technique. So then I knew I could do it. So I got myself some press board and I made some marbleizing paint on it, and I'm going to give you more information about that in a minute. I put epoxy on it and then cut them down to tile sizes, and that is for my backsplash. Again, I'm going to give you more information about that in just a minute. Then it was time to get the backsplash up and the countertop painted. So tearing off the edging was my first step, and then you definitely need to sand all over your Formica, because if it's too slippery, it's hard for the paint to adhere to it. And I'm not exactly sure why. I watched everything from the Stone Coat Countertop guy, and he said to do that, so I did it. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't sand it, but I did that. Then I just rolled the paint out. Now, I didn't worry about it getting on the wall there because I knew there was going to be backsplash there. There's a few spots where there's paint that I don't want to get this paint on, but so I just did an edger paint on that area. But otherwise, you just paint everything. Now, I did a gray color because I knew I was going to do this marbleizing technique, and I wanted the base to be kind of a gray, and then I'll put all the rest of the colors over the top of it. I didn't worry about my kitchen sink because I knew I was replacing that. I did get my paint from a mist tint bin at Lowe's, so it was very cheap paint, and you really don't need high quality paint for this because once you put the epoxy on, it's not going anywhere. Okay, so once I got my gray base coat, some of you, that might be what you want to stick with, whatever color, and that's it. But I definitely wanted to do the marbleizing. So then I took a white can of spray paint and I started spraying just little spritzes here and there. I wanted it to be very, almost cloud-like. And definitely if you're spray painting in your house, you want to have your doors and windows open, get some ventilation. And I didn't care about my sink because I knew I was replacing that. I don't really care about the walls because I'm putting backsplash there, but I didn't want them to get on the outlets. And this is the double stick tape that I used to mount up my backsplash. And after it was mounted up, I grouted it just like you would tile. And this is what it looks like before I did the grout. Put that all around. And it took quite a bit of work, but it was very reasonably budgeted because it doesn't cost a lot for those kinds of boards. The one thing that I did forget was to put little spacers behind the outlets, because once you put your tile up, it's not as far to the wall. So I had to do that after. Then here's how I did my marbleizing paint. Now I would definitely put a picture, if you're marbleizing, put a picture of what you want the marble to look like and have it to look at, because it's harder than you think to do veins and lines. It's not as easy as just something that's in your head. So I was looking at the kind of marbleizing that I wanted. And then I just got some of my gray paint and I just kept mixing different colors into it, adding white, adding white, adding white, and black to get my veins. And then after I was finished with my veins and I was happy with it, I realized that it was a little bit darker than I really wanted. So I dusted it with spray paint to lighten it up. Then comes my favorite thing, Stone Coat Countertop Epoxy. And this is awesome. Now, I definitely suggest that you roll it on with a sponge rather than a regular paintbrush, because you don't want those little fuzzies getting in your epoxy. Now, here's the key to epoxy. You absolutely have to measure, and it has to be exactly equal parts, because there's 2 parts to it, A and B. And if you even have that formula off a little bit, your epoxy will not set up. Trust me, I know, because I did it on a table and I had to redo it. The other thing, when it comes to mixing your epoxy, you definitely might want to invest in one of those mixer things that goes on the end of a drill, because otherwise you'll be stirring and stirring and stirring. And you really have to get the epoxy mixed up well, especially if you're doing a countertop and you don't want to mess it up. So I got me one of the stirring things. I've already used it for my grout. I use this thing so often. But yeah, you really mix it up and get it to where it looks like white foam, almost like a milk color. And then it's time to put it on. Now, I put on a very thin coat because I knew I was going to do 2 coats. So I did a very thin coat at first so I could get the hang of it. Now, you notice that my roller is that sponge kind of roller rather than a regular paint roller, because, again, you don't want fuzzies. The last thing you ever want is lint or dust or anything. So remember how I had the doors and windows open for spray painting? Well, you want doors and windows closed, absolutely no one in the room, and every kind of dust particle cleaned up before you do epoxy, because every little tiny piece of lint will show up when you're done if you don't have a completely clean space. The other thing is, you definitely need plastic everywhere, because even one little drip will leave a mark. Okay, after you get it on there how you want it, a heat gun is needed, or a blowtorch. And this is in fast motion, but you definitely want to go along and that heats up and pops all the bubbles and it levels it out. And you go over it and over it and over it till you see no bubbles and not one spot that doesn't look like clear glass. And it does take a while. I mean, this is a time-consuming thing. And I could see after my first coat, when I look really closely, I could still see some bubbles that I missed. And this is the thing. Bubbles seem to just keep on coming up. So you do your heat gun until you see no bubbles. And then you wait half an hour and you come back and you do the heat gun again. Now, I had a very large area, but I did it one section at a time. But I would come back and I would heat it up again. And even when it's starting to set up, you can still heat up and get those bubbles and the little parts that aren't very level out of it. And again, this was just my first coat, so I knew I was going to be going over it again, but it's so much easier if you just get it heat it up. You just keep on playing with that heat gun. And I will say it's very rewarding. When you're sitting there watching everything just turn to glass, it's fabulous. Now, some of the epoxy will drip off the edge, and you want it to. Anything that's overloaded will kind of drip on out the edge, and that's why you got to have plastic down the sides of your countertops and on your floor. And you don't want to have any kind of pets or children or anybody coming along and touching this. This needs to set up, completely set up for at least 12 hours before it's even you're even able to touch a little bit. And you don't want to be touching it to see if it's dry either because it'll leave a mark. So the best thing is to just let it be. Now, as it starts to dry, you take a plastic knife or some sort of putty knife or something, and you run along the very bottom edge. Any drips that are starting to drip down, you scoop those off the very bottom. You don't want to think, oh, I'll just sand those off later. No, epoxy does not sand off later. It is so hard when it's done. So you just want to make sure you get it right the first time. I put my second coat on 24 hours after the first coat. And then after that coat dries, you don't want to put anything on it for a few days, even though it's dry, because it really needs to set in. And I think I waited a week before I really tested that. After all that effort, I just didn't, you could set a cup on it or whatever, but I didn't really put a bag of groceries or anything on it until it was really set up. So you do need to have some time. The amazing thing is I did this 3 years ago and it is still holding up fabulously. There's been a couple of times someone has cut on it with a knife and there was like little cuts and I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to put another coat on. And then the next day, I can't even find it. It's like it sort of fills in. I wouldn't say just go chopping on it all the time. Use a cutting board. You treat it like you would treat marble, really. It cleans up nicely. It stays looking clean and shiny. I actually use Windex to buff it up and then it's ready to go. So definitely this is a great alternative to ugly Formica to make it look whatever color, whatever style you like. And my biggest piece of advice would be to go to Stone Coat Countertop and watch their YouTube videos and figure out what style you would like and find out all of their tips and tricks.